Now that we have our two drop-down button from fields through which user can select the start and end destination, now let's provide our user with another feature, that is selecting the departure date. For that, we need a button and a text. The button will be used to show the date picker dialog, and whatever date user picks, we want to show the date in a string format in the text widget just to the right of this button. So to do that, we need a row widget, and after the second drop down button from field, I am taking a row widget here, and I want the alignment, the main axis alignment should be center, and the first child will be a text button. So text button requires an on pressed function, and instead of assigning anonymous function, I just want to pass a function reference here. So the name of the function should be show or select date, and this method needs to be declared or defined. So I am pressing Alt Enter and selecting create method select date. And now the another thing we need to pass in the text button, that is a child. So the child will be a constant text that will say select departure date. And after the text button, we should have a text widget that will actually show the text or the date in a text format. And when user actually comes to this page for the first time, then what should be the text of this text widget? So I have rerun this application, and whatever text I put here, that will be shown at the very first, but we want to show a dynamic text based on this departure date object, because whenever user select a date from the date picker, that date picker object will be assigned into this variable. So after selecting a date, this variable will not be null anymore. So we can check its status to actually put a text in this text widget. So we can write that, or we can check a condition in a pure Dart code inside the text widget constructor argument, and that is, if departure date equals null, then we will show this text, that means no date chosen, or else we will actually show the departure date, but departure date is an object, a datetime object. We cannot directly print a datetime object inside this text widget, so we have to do something with the this datetime object first. But for now, I'm just passing some sample text here. So if I now click this button, then it says that no date chosen, because it is null, so it chooses this text. Now let's go to the select date function. To show a date picker, we have a very simple method for that, and the method is show date picker. And we need to provide 4 arguments sequentially. The first argument we need to pass is a context, and the second argument is the initial date, and that will be today's date. The first date will also be today's date, and the last date will be today's date dot add. I'm adding some duration here, so const duration days 7. And now if I press this button one more time, hot reload, and then select press the select departure date button, we'll be able to see a date picker. And the date picker is currently selecting the today's date, and today's date is 28th of February. And as you can see, we cannot select the previous date because we set the first date to be the current date, and the last date user can pick will be the 7 days from today's date. That means if we go to the next page or next month, we can select up to this date. And after that, okay, we can select actually from the March 7 because we set the duration of day 7. So current date plus 7 more days. So we don't let our user to make the reservation the date from not the date after 7 days from today's date. So now we are able to show our user a date picker, and now it's time to user to select a date, and whenever whatever date he picks, he select that, and he has to press this OK button. And what will happen if user press this OK button? First thing, the date picker dialog will be gone, and how we will take the selected date now. To do that, we need to go to this show date picker function return type, and if I hover over the mouse and set our cursor and put the mouse cursor here, as you can see, the date picker function or show date picker function actually returns a datetime object that is wrapped inside a future. Future means this function is asynchronous. That means whatever data type this function is returning, the time is not confirmed, or this function will not return this datetime object immediately. Because let's consider the scenario. Whenever I'm pressing this button, this function is called as well as this function is called. And whenever this function is called, the normal behavior of a function is whenever a function is called, the function does what is supposed to do, and then immediately the function returns the value. But in that case, this function is a future function. It will not return the value unless the things that this function is supposed to do is not done. So whenever I press this button, we are seeing this dialog because of this function, and until the user select any date, this function will not return anything. So to get the actual value, we need to use two options actually. Because this is a future function, it will return a value in future. So to get the actual future value, we need to do two things. Actually, we have two options. First of all, we can use an await keyword in front of the function, and to use await, we have to mark our function body as async. So this await keyword means as if we are waiting for this function so that it can return us a result, and whatever result it returns, we have to take it. So I am declaring a variable like selected date, and this function will return a datetime object, and this selected date is of type datetime object. And if user actually press this cancel button, then this function returns nothing. Actually not nothing, this function will actually return a null. So that's why we have to check whether this datetime object returned by the DatePicker function is null or not. So I'm checking if this selected date is not null. That means user has picked a date. Now we will assign the selected date inside this departure date object. So departure date will be selected date. And now if I press hot reload again, and whenever this value changes, this widget should rebuild, and we should now able to see this text. Now let me select any of the date, and as you can see, it still shows no date chosen, because to rebuild this text widget, we need to call this build function once again. And to do that, since we are inside a stateful widget, we have this setState method, and we need to call this setState method to revoke the build function once again, so that this text widget will rebuild with new value. So if I now press hot reload, you can see the text has been changed from no date chosen to sample date. But we don't want to print any sample date here. We want to show the actual date that user have chosen. And to convert a datetime object to a string, we need to define a function, and we will define that function inside that helper function class, or helper function dot file. So we'll declare a function, and this function will return a string, and the name of the function is get formatted date. And this function will take a datetime object as parameters, and it will have a second argument, and that is optional, and it will also have a default value, and that is the pattern. That means in which pattern the date should be shown. So this will be string pattern, and the default value is day, month, and year. You can actually assign any pattern you want, or this is the default pattern for this function. And when we call this function, we must have to pass this datetime object, and this is optional. We don't need to pass pattern, and if we don't need anything for pattern, this pattern will be used. But you can pass a pattern argument with a new pattern if you want, then that pattern will override this pattern. And now from this function we will simply return a date format object, and to have that date format object, we need to add a library. So I need to go to the pubspec.yaml file and find the dependencies section, and under the dependencies section, just after the Cupertino icons, I am just writing INTL, that is short for internationalization. So this is a library, this is a Dart package that is used to format date and number, and also used for language localizations. So I'm taking this library. I don't need to specify the version numbers because Android Studio will automatically download the latest version. And when I'm done with that, I need to click this pub get button, of course. As you can see, it says process finished with exit code 0. That means our library is now ready to use. I'm closing this pubspec.yaml, just pressing ignore, and now I can import, or I can import when I use the class for the first time. It will show an error, and then I can press Alt Enter to import the package. So I will return a date format object. So date format, as you can see, it is coming from the internationalization package. So date format, I need to pass a pattern, and this is the pattern. And now I want to call a format function that will return a string, and I need to pass a datetime object, and the object will be this dt. So through this function we can format any datetime object with this pattern, and also we can actually override this pattern by passing a string argument when we call this function. And now I will call this function just here. So instead of showing a sample text object, I'm just calling get formatted date and passing the date departure datetime object, and I need to make it not null. And if I now press the hot reload function button once again, it will supposed to show the today's date as the format. We can also pass, if we want, another pattern as the second parameters by giving the pattern, writing the pattern argument here, and pass any format. Like I can show the weekdays, like the three first letter of the weekdays, by putting a triple E here, then the day, triple E, then a triple M for 3-character month, and then day, then the year. So now the date will be shown in this pattern. So today is actually Tuesday, then it will show TUE, as you can see here, TUE now, and this month is February, so this is Feb, the day 28, and year 2023. So in this way we can actually pick the date by using this show DatePicker function. And since this function is marked with future, we handle future method either with async await, or another way we can actually call a then function after every future or stream method, actually future method. And we'll use then function as well in the upcoming videos.